Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Spencer Hilligoss, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then we want to talk about all the cool things you're doing in real estate investing. That work?
That works great. Honored to be here, Mike. Big
Thanks
fan
for
of the
being
show.
here, bud. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this. I'm super excited for our time together. So where were you born?
Born and raised in Redwood City, California. I live in
Ooh.
Alameda, California now, just across the other side of the Bay Area.
That's a pretty area.
Yeah,
Redwood
love it.
City,
Changed a
pretty-
lot in the last 20 years, 30 years, but yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So growing up in Redwood City, what was your favorite thing growing up there?
I think everyone knows that's part of Silicon Valley, right? And I
Yeah.
think that being surrounded by all these razor sharp folks that are passionate about building things to solve problems in the world, right? That was cool. But as a kid, I just thought it was fun to be around folks that wanted to nerd out and play punk rock and metal. Frankly, I thought it was, I thought it was fun to, do the less business oriented things. So yeah, growing up, that's what it was all about for me. Is very big into music, playing in bands, hence all the tattoos and stuff. And I think that that eventually was, it got changed up a bit, Mike, because my dad actually was a broker. My dad was a broker for 30 years, and my band schedule and stuff got thrown off because I started working open houses for him and cleaning out fridges at properties, pretty young. So it was cool. It was cool to go, shake hands with Joe Montana and Jerry Rice at showings and stuff. Like that kind of stuff was pretty sweet in hindsight. I don't know if I fully appreciated that at the time. But yeah, it was an interesting mix of being surrounded by kind of the music stuff, as well as just a very, high growth, fast paced, razor sharp Silicon Valley environment all at the same time in a mix.
Wow. So here's a question for you. What made you decide to get into a band?
Oh man, best friend had a guitar. I got a guitar, got into high school, like very beginning of high school.
Mhm.
And a guy who's still friends with me, lives like one city away here today. Known him for, 20, 30 years now. He's like, I bought a bass. I remember the exact moment. He was like, I bought a bass guitar. You want to play in a band? And that was it. And literally it was that simple. And so every day after that, it's at the very beginning of high school, we found another friend, mutual friend. He was a drummer, and we sounded awful, like absolutely garbage, and we thought we sounded good enough.
You were biased?
A little biased, very tone deaf, like remarkably tone deaf. And this is in a high school where like they didn't have a ton of space. It was like we went and dominated this one little room and kept the windows open, and people were like, what's that awful sound coming from that room up there? Over time, we performed in front of the whole school, shamelessly. Unfortunately, I have videos of that still. I don't really want to watch them again.
Incriminating, right?
Very, very incriminating, Mike. In hindsight, you see kids walking by going, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
But yeah, it really is that simple, right? Those little moments like that where, a friend walks up and says, I bought a bass. I don't know how to play it. You want to go start a band? And that's how it goes.
So do you still play bass guitar?
So I play just guitar, like lead guitar these days, hobby style, when I can, as a guy who I was in, tech career for 13 years and run my own business now for many, with two young kids still, 10 and 6, both boys. So I try to find time to play something.
Yeah.
It's a little less intense on the metal and punk front these days, because I try to, more wheels on the bus kind of stuff as opposed to the heavier stuff. So try to find time. More of a hobby though.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. So, so other than the sort of children's songs that you play for your kids, is there another genre that you like, or one that you have gravitated to that you play?
Yeah, I mean, still into, just rock and still
Yeah.
play more of the niche stuff, I would say, that people would be shocked by. As a guy who was in the corporate world for 13
Yeah.
years, going home and playing metal that has a lot of loud noises, a lot of big
Mhm.
solos, they're like, "You play that stuff? You like that stuff?"
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Yeah, this has always been my jam." I've
Yeah.
always appreciated that. Uh, and I know that you like and appreciate getting into the real stories, Mike, but I'll just say that music has played a huge role for me, especially the intense stuff through challenging periods in life, and I look back at like formative moments throughout, family loss and business challenge, but particularly family loss over years. And that has played a very important role for me.
Yeah.
And so, the heavier stuff does that in a remarkably cathartic way. So it
Yes.
helps you get through tough times as
Yeah.
opposed to less healthy ways of coping.
Yeah. It's sort of where you can go, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's escape in a healthy way in some ways, I like to think. You process stuff,
Yeah.
you can get through tough moments in business and life and loss, and music is a great vehicle for that.
I love it. So here's a question for you. Who's your favorite group and what's your favorite song that you play?
Oh my goodness, that is a hard question. I mean, let's go by genre real quick. I mean, back in the 90s style, I love Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
Newer stuff. I'm gonna drop some names that may not make a ton of sense for most folks because they're kind of niche. I love Refused. I love Converge. I like these bands that are more niche, screamy metal stuff. But still a huge fan of just the hard rock and alternative stuff from like the 90s.
That's cool. That's cool. So do you like grunge? Is it grunge? Is it what's
Oh
the
yeah, love grunge.
Oh,
Like
there you go.
Alice in
Okay.
Chains and Nirvana,
Nirvana. There you go. Yeah.
all the I mean, that's what I was musically raised on. I don't know if
Yeah.
that helped my guitar playing, my musicianship at all, Mike, but, power chords were my jam. You don't learn how to be a great jazz musician that way. Now I have
I
to
got you.
unlearn 20 years of bad habits just to get to the point of playing well now, but
I
hey,
got you. I
the
got
the
you.
pa the passion is there.
Yeah. I love it. That's cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Oof. I have to just give credit to it. I think that, looking back at the experience, watching my dad grow his business, I have to say my dad,
Yeah.
um, in a very positive way. I think that watching him wake up at 4 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning every day and being like, "Why does he do that?"
Mhm.
Like, I never understood that.
Yeah.
And of course, we do our best somehow. For some reason, all of us are programmed to not want to turn into our parents early
Yeah.
on, right? That's
Yeah.
just we rebel.
Yeah.
It's what our brains want to do. Now I look back at the years early in our business, that I built here, and I was working full time, grinding 80 hours a week in an office job, and somehow I found the motivation in my mind and my heart to do the same thing.
Mhm.
And I'm like, where did that come from? Where did the motivation, the spark come from to get up at 4 in the morning while we had a couple of young kids,
Mhm.
build the business before the business, do the job before the job? And I'm looking back and I'm like, that work ethic came from dad,
Yeah.
and even just the way hearing him interact with clients, hearing him talk to business partners, all that stuff. So I got to say, dad was a very big, very positive influence.
Did he have his own office?
He did, but he eventually built a home office. I mean, he was a
Okay.
broker for a couple of the bigger firms throughout the years.
Yeah.
Really, really high performing broker in the '90s, and but then he built a home office. And the home office is where I saw him even bringing a couple staff into it, just a place on our property, and he was running out of there. So I got to kind of see just the movements, right? I got to see the movements of how day to day, entrepreneurship goes. Like it takes the hustle, take the hard work, the sweat equity,
Does.
whatever you want to
It
call it.
does. Yeah, you gotta bring it, that's for sure. So what was the single most important thing that you learned watching your dad grow his business?
Gosh, I'm going to say this in a way that I want it to come across as incredibly positive overall, which is, I watched him build this business,
Mhm.
single income household,
Mhm.
right? Mom was an incredible mom, taking care of the most important job, which is the household and raising us.
Sure.
Dad building the business over the course of a couple decades to extraordinarily big heights. Like
Mhm.
we lived comfortably, in my teenage years, and then we got hit with what we called in our family, kind of the dark decade, and the dark decade meaning lost my younger brother to cancer when he was a teenager.
Mm.
Lost, I think, 3 grandparents within the next 6 months or a year after that, roughly. And then it was just like hit after hit after hit.
Yeah.
Um, and when that happens, it's there. There's splash damage, whatever you want to call it, you know? And I think one of the many ramifications of that tough time was that dad's business shrunk, you know,
Yeah.
because for all a great many reasons. And uh, that one income household, you know, that was not producing the way it used to. So watching that financially as a teenager and then a young adult, you know, going into 20s, I'm sitting there going, man, this is scary. You know,
Mhm.
this is really scary. And I never forgot that lesson as I, you know, made stupid decisions in college, as we all do, and go off and make my own mistakes in my career. But I look back at that time going, hard work built that business for him. Hard work sustained it and then came back out of that dark decade after that. But what could have been avoided? What could have been avoided by having like one income stream into that household? What could have been avoided by insulating the family more? You know, all those things I think about now as a dad,
Yeah.
with my own kids. You know, my wife, who's my co-founder, um, and also how can I be present for my kids?
Yeah.
You know, like because you have to hustle
Yeah.
to do that. To be a broker, you have to hustle, and that's not my line of work here. What I do, but that's a lesson I took away. You know, how do you be present to build something that actually allows you to be present with your family and insulate your family from these big shock moments? Because life's going to slap you, whether
Yeah.
you like it or not. It's going to come and kick you in the teeth. And how do you brace yourself for that on top of it? I know we were chatting a little bit about this ahead of time, offline, Mike, but like,
Mhm.
you know, didn't bring up there's a flurry of, unfortunately, addiction and alcoholism in my family. You know, thankfully I haven't been hit by that, but you know, it's when you're surrounded by it and you go to other AA meetings to support people in your family, and all that stuff. You just have to find a way through it and learn from those kicks in the teeth, so that you can be there to support others along the way. So
Yeah.
that was a long-winded answer to your question of basically saying those are those are the biggest learnings I think from watching that business arc over
Yeah.
time.
Well, I think you're more wise now because you witnessed it. Right?
Yes.
You got a chance to see it happen, and to your credit, you're trying to make it better for your kids. We all want, as dads, we all want a better life for our kids than what we had. And so we're always looking, right? So the day that my son, who's now 25, going to be 26 in a couple of weeks, um, the day that my son was born, he was born by C-section, and I'm standing in the operating room, and they handed him to me, and I'd never held a baby before. So I asked the nurse, I said, "Am I doing it right?" That's right.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh yeah, you're doing
That's a
fine."
fair
Right.
question.
And Michael's looking at me. Michael's just looking at me like, "Okay, now what?" He's not crying. He's super chill. I'm like, "Are you sure this is my kid?" Right? And and literally I got a chill from head to toe. And it dawned on me, standing in that operating room holding my brand new baby boy, that I was literally in the middle of violating all the promises that I had made to myself as a kid.
Hmm.
Because I always knew I'd be a dad. And I always wanted to be that dad that everybody got tired of because I showed up at everything, right? I was
Right.
I was at practice, I was at games, I was at recitals, I was at whatever, right? I was there, okay? And I realized, standing in that operating room, that my business was running me and not me running my business. And I was literally in the lending business at the time. I had shut my phone off for 4 hours, and I had 52 voicemail messages when I came back to it.
Oof.
Four of them were personal. Hey, congratulations on the baby. All the rest of them, 48 of them, were all business. And it dawned on me that I was literally e- every day violating this promise I had made to myself, that I was going to, when my babies came, I was going to be in control of my time, not the other way around. And so I
Yes.
spent the next 3 days, because you have to be in the maternity, you have to be in the hospital for 3 days until, after you've had a C-section, until you can be discharged. And so I spent 3 days in the hospital with my wife and my newborn baby, thinking about how I spent my day.
Yes.
And I moved into an extra bedroom in our condo, and I cut out 6 hour or 3 hours a day. So I was able to get rid of 3 hours a day commuting back and forth to work. I was able to use couriers to send my loan files to the office. I was able to use email, dial up AOL, thank you very much, to
Oh,
send my
nice.
to send my applications in. Okay. The whole tones and the whole, right, all
Oh
that stuff
yeah.
you've
I,
heard,
I remember
I
that.
literally was using it, right? And so I went out and spent $5,000 on a plain paper fax machine that was huge. right? And set it up in my new home office so that I could have plain paper faxes. And oh yeah. So yeah, you're right. But here's the thing. After I was done, I got rid of 6 hours of wasted time a day.
Big chunk of time.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I now was making exponentially more per hour. I mean, I was doing really well. I was in the top, I don't know what percent, but I was way up there in terms of income earners. I was doing really, really well. And I had to figure out a balance. I had to figure out a way to where I'd have more time to be able to spend time with my new baby and my family, my
Yes.
new family, And so it really it hits you, right? And then all of a sudden you just go to work. You go to work trying to make it better than when you had it. And that's hopefully what I did. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah. Well, I
they're
appreciate you sharing it.
24 and they're 25 now, that are two kids. And each one of them has reached out to me and thanked me independent of the other one for how I raised them. And, you know, I mean, cool stuff, right?
That's incredible stuff.
It's awesome. And
Well, I
my
mean, like
daughter even called me her freshman year in college and said, Dad, my junior year in high school, we were the perfect family.
whoa.
Yeah.
What
Right.
kid says that back to their parents?
No kidding. And so I'm like, yeah,
No.
right. So all these kids that are now I'm working with that are now having babies and that kind of thing, I'm like, I hope your daughter calls you one of these days and says that to you because I'll never forget it.
Yeah. You
Right.
might
I
have to
mean,
wait a decade or two for that
yeah,
call once they get to the
right.
teenage years, from what I'm
But
told,
how cool. How
Yeah.
cool. So
No, good
yeah.
for you, Mike.
So you just so the thing about this and the thing that I love about your story is you had an opportunity to see this happen,
Mm.
to experience it, and I think it made you better. I think it helped you with how you look at life. Would you agree?
I completely agree. And in hindsight, we all have a choice. The learning for me is like, we all have a choice as to where we channel
Yeah.
pain, right?
True.
Where do you channel anger? I mean, pick one of the negative biggies
Yeah.
that hits all of us, right? And we have a choice, right? We
Yeah.
have a choice as to how we react. And I think that it's resonating with me hearing your story, Mike, about that moment in the hospital after the C-section, and realizing you had to reconfigure, because like just to give a quick anecdote, like we just got back, meaning my two young boys who are 10 and 6 right now,
Mhm.
and my wife Jennifer, and we spent, this is our second summer in a row where we were able to go literally live and still work, not a vacation, but live for more than 5 weeks in another country. And like
Wow.
that is at the culmination of 8 years of working my butt off,
Mm.
and Jennifer working her butt off on the heels of a 13-year careers where we had the opposite. We
Yeah.
had like literally, I was working 80 hours a week in tech companies
Mhm.
for 5 tech companies over the course of 13 years.
Yeah.
And these were some of them very early stage tech companies. This is
Mhm.
Silicon Valley. And I sought that out, but in hindsight, I'm looking back and I remember the exact moment, and you're making me think of this with the
Yeah.
hospital story, is that I had probably gone about maybe up to 2 weeks when I hadn't seen one of our sons, because I was going into the office so early and I was coming home so late. And this is the
Right.
earliest, most hardcore startup that I'd worked at. And I'm
Right.
grateful for the experience in hindsight because I learned so much.
Right.
But my goodness, that was the catalyst or spark in our
Yeah.
household when Jennifer and I are like, man, something's got to give. Doesn't matter how much W-2 income, how much, dual income in California is kind of necessary for a lot of folks, right? But
Right.
like we were sitting there maxing out 401ks, feeling great about that for a little bit, but then going, where's the off ramp from all of this?
Right.
This is broken, and
Yeah.
and you're summarizing the learning that I think about regularly as I reflect and try to make sure I'm staying on track with this in our
Yeah.
family, which is making family the priority, making health the priority.
Yeah.
You have to fight for that.
Yeah. You do.
You have to fight for that, and it was broken for us for
Yeah.
a very long time,
Yeah.
and it's taken deliberate effort to get to a point where we're like, okay, is it after a certain point, is more money helpful, or are we really being honest with ourselves about what the priority is, right? Are we looking for more zeros after a point, or are we looking for more meaningful time with the ones we love that we don't have unlimited time with?
Right.
How about
Yeah.
presence of mind with your kids? How about presence of mind with your family? So I
Yeah.
think that it is so doable, but it starts with that honest assessment up front. And I remember, I think you'll appreciate this. we took one weekend, like Jennifer and I, and this is when we were deep in that moment. And we were like, hire a sitter. We're going to take the whole weekend, get the kids out of the house. We're going to sit down. We literally did this so business nerdy way. We're going to get sticky notes, write down, how do we get to a future that we want to get to? Let's describe it in detail. Call it the future state. What's your ideal day? And how do we get to a certain amount of income by that time?
Right.
And so and it was not easy, man. I mean, we were talk about hardcore conversations between a couple. There was tears, there was laughter, there was reconciliation, and all of that cycled through multiple times in one weekend. But we walked out the other side of that exercise going, oh, well, now we understand where we want to go. We literally walked out with a goal of within 15 years, we want to have fully replaced our W-2 income, and which sounds like an eternity, but we came back the next weekend and cut that goal in half roughly to 7. And we ended up hitting it in 5.
Oh, awesome.
But it started with that really hardcore, honestly, and self-assessment to make sure that we were like, we have to get to a place where family's at the priority and not grinding it out in careers because we got it twisted. So I just wanted to share that because you made me think of it when you talk about the hospital story with your kid. Very
well.
relatable.
I want to acknowledge you, and what I want to acknowledge is at some point you and your wife came to a place where you sort of hit a wall, right? And you just sort of went, okay, hold on, right? We need to take a break. We need to dig into this thing and figure this out. There are so many people, Spencer, that don't do that.
Right.
That they hit that wall and they don't take the weekend. They don't sit down and have, and by the way, that usually ends up being the end of their relationship, right? It ends up being the end
For sure.
the end of all kinds of things, right? Because they don't stop, reassess, sort of stop, drop, and roll kind of thing like you do when you're on fire, right?
Right.
It took a lot for you and for your wife to recognize we're off track here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, sort of the easy thing to do, and I know this sounds weird, but kind of the easy thing to do is just keep going, right? Just keep going.
Totally.
Just, drink wine, do whatever, self-medicate, but keep going, right? And it's like,
Yes.
You guys stopped, dropped, rolled, figured it out, and came out the other side with a plan.
Yes.
And that really takes a lot. You have to care deeply about your family, and you have to care deeply about your marriage and your success in that to actually go through that and to take the time and the effort to do it. And it does take time and it does take effort. And it's, a lot of people are into this escapism thing, and that's not where true life is, right? True life is in what you guys experience in terms of sitting down and going through it and figuring it out and figuring out a way forward. And then ending up coming back and cutting the cutting the time in half, right? I mean, that's really cool, man. That's
I
awesome.
appreciate it. Well, I mean, coming on, and thank you for that. I think coming back to, I don't want to be grim about it, but having an honest conversation here about the experience, like, I think most people, my theory is when I tell them that story, we're talking friends, like personal friends, and they're like, how did you guys decide to go and do your own thing, your own business, your own investing thing, and leave behind those jobs? Because it sounds terrifying. And I was like, well, happy to report it is in fact terrifying. It doesn't matter how much you prepare. Like that is, life throws stuff at you.
Yeah.
But I think the key difference is I'm grateful, and I really mean that. I am grateful for the pain and the pain tolerance levels that come along with experiencing hardship, because it made that seem so doable.
Yeah.
Like for us, it was not a question. I know this is not the case for everybody. I'm very lucky to have found a person that, I can be honest with at the core with my spouse. That doesn't always mean we get along. It means we hash it out. But if you find that, then it just comes down to the willingness to go through those kinds of discussions. And I think a lot of folks want to get to the point where they see folks build their own businesses, or they have lifestyle by design is the cool way to say that, I guess, these days, but you've got to fight for that stuff, and fighting for that stuff involves psychological and emotional awkwardness in spades.
Yeah. And it's what nobody talks about, right? Nobody talks about, like, we just talked about this in the previous hour with the previous episode that we did. There was a time when this guy was in Northern California as part of a tech startup, believe it or not. You guys probably know each other. And he he literally drove back and forth between San Francisco, the Bay Area, and Los Angeles in a U-Haul 5 times after working 14 hours a day. Okay, 5 times. Stays the night in a cheap hotel, gets in the U-Haul the next morning and drives back. And nobody talks about that kind of stuff. Nobody talks about how you kind of have to get your dander up, right? You kind of have to, like, you guys went into that weekend that was massively being uncomfortable. You went into that with sort of this intensity of, we got to get this figured out. If we don't, this thing's broken and we're not going to fix it, right? And so, and to be willing, number one, to go into it, and number two, to lay it on the line, like to go deep and get into these painful places, because we try to avoid the pain, right? Yes. It's in our brain, right? It's fight or flight. Okay. And our brain is designed to help us continue to survive. And what it does is it makes us self-medicate, it makes us escape, it makes us do whatever to sort of smooth things over. And what you guys did was just the opposite. You got in there, rolled your sleeves up and got dirty and figured out a way to bring this thing back together and to completely create a life by design. Yeah, you got to pay for it, right? You got to pay the dues price in order to get, right? And that's why I know what we're talking about today is going to be of big time value to the people that listen to this podcast, simply because they now know it's not as easy as it looks. When you look at things on television, when you look at things in the movies, when you look at all these things and you think, oh, one of the things that I would suggest to people is read the Elon Musk autobiography that Walter Isaacson wrote. Oh my goodness, right? Sleeping on the roof of the assembly plant in Fresno, sleeping on the floor underneath the conference room in their office. I mean, hello, this guy literally moved in. He moved in, right? He moved in and he lived there for months. And he went down to the assembly line for. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out Calendly.com/Rio760.